really push yourself to be excellent and be around people that are excellent, and be around people that will drive you to greater heights and greater excellence. But at the same time, remember that you're human. So you have to take care of yourself, right? You have to exercise. It's super important to exercise, eat right, sleep. These are things that really help power that engine, right? You do need rest, and you do need a little bit of other activities to keep you focused ultimately.
Hey, Jason, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure, man.
Good. In the spirit of making this as directly relevant to our audience, the Caribbean data science and AI students and professionals out there, let's jump right in and tell us what you've been working on at Pace.
Great. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me, Jeff. So at Pace, it's a company I co-founded back in 2017, and we've built a dynamic pricing engine, and that engine is powered by machine learning and statistical modeling. And we've built a product around that engine, broadly in the field of revenue management, and we're selling that currently into the hospitality space. So in one sentence, we allow hotel owners to dynamically price their rooms and maximize their revenue and profit, much the same way as Uber surge prices and dynamically prices their seats for ridership.
Terrific, terrific. Now, you mentioned machine learning and some AI in there. So let's take a step back and level set for all the folks out there who are new to the field of AI data science. Um, and this is going to be the topic of most of our interviews, but how do you, Jason, distinguish between artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science? Could you give us some examples of how you apply the different parts of the spectrum to what you're working on?
Absolutely. So maybe a little bit controversial, but I tend not to like to use the term AI at all. I think it's become a bit of motherhood and apple pie. It's what Fortune wants to put on the front cover of the magazine to sell magazines. But really, when I refer to AI, I'm really thinking more about a general intelligence. So something that can truly be multi-domain and make independent decisions in a broad way. So that's something that's probably decades off. We're talking sort of movie level, HAL level artificial intelligence. So that's AI, and again, that's why I very, very seldom use the term AI. Machine learning, on the other hand, is something that's relevant and is happening today, and this is just incredibly exciting and probably the biggest revolution in computer science and statistics in the last decade. And for me, it's really about training an agent to infer what its next step, what its next decision answer should be, using a corpus of data. So you're basically training ultimately a computer program to make decisions for you in an automated way. And we use that every day because ultimately our system is built with an intelligent agent that is actually making pricing decisions for the humans around them. And then finally, data science. There's a kind of an old, very worn joke now, but a data scientist is a computer scientist who knows more math and statistics than the average CS person, or a mathematician who knows more computer science than the average mathematician. But really, what it is about finding patterns in data and really understanding what sort of causal effects in data. So it tends to be something where, my definition anyway, it's a practice where you're applying statistics and mathematics to really understand trends and patterns.
Good. So, what are a couple tangible examples of how you guys apply it at Pace?
Yeah. So in fact, where the most sophisticated of our customers and our partners are right now is in using data science rather than ML. And so we bring the ML to the party, so to speak. So,
Hmm.
the most sophisticated of our customers are actually analyzing their demand data, and they'll have statisticians working on their team who will actually draw out demand patterns from their data and use that to manually price their rooms. So they'll be basically doing regular daily work with their data to understand how to influence demand with price and how to capture most value with price. And of course, we bring an automated agent to go do that for them in the form of an ML.
Terrific, terrific. So let's drill down a bit and broaden out from the story of Pace. So I know you were a VC and have been back and forth between the journey on the entrepreneurial side and on the venture capital side. But tell us a little bit about what took you into this entrepreneurial venture, and anything you want to share about the background before that that encouraged you to get to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I suppose venture capital alone, we could probably talk, you and I, for a few hours and give a separate webinar on that because that's a topic unto itself. But I started my VC journey having been at a startup previously. So I drank the Kool-Aid of startups being the best way to take technology and science and actually make it into real products that customers can use and get value from. So I'm hooked on that as a kind of a route to market for new products. And so when I joined a venture firm, it was basically another way to sort of tap into that entrepreneurial spirit and spend lots of time with great entrepreneurs.
This is Amadeus.
Correct? It's Amadeus Capital.
Mhm.
Again, we can talk for hours about that too, but just to stay on the sort of current state of affairs, which is the entrepreneurial venture I'm on, ultimately, I'm an engineer. I mean, that's what is ticking behind my eyes. It's the engineering need to go build things, sometimes break them, but ultimately figure things out and build things. And so I had that itch to go scratch, and this is why I left venture to come back and build a company. So, I used to be on the front lines, actually building product as an engineer. Now I joke that what I'm building is a company. That's what I've engineered. And that's the robot or machine that I'm working on now. And a company is ultimately a kind of a machine, right? And that it takes input and produces output at some point. So that's what led me back onto the sort of startup world. I really have had just great experiences building companies, and I wanted to go do it again.
And what's it been like building pace with the diaspora from the Caribbean? Can you talk a bit about your co-founders and investors
Yes.
and what being from the
Yes.
Caribbean has meant for the journey?
Yeah. So it's been actually quite important, principally because one of my co-founders is Jamaican. So he's a guy named John Paul Clark, a very, very talented guy. He's a professor at UT Austin these days. So he's done the professorial thing of moonlighting and starting companies while being a professor. But he and I have known each other from university days, and we've always stayed in touch after leaving university and always talked about doing something together. And Pace is the direct result of those many late night conversations about what we could cook up together. And our friendship was born out of being two guys far from home, right? Going to university in the US and being from the Caribbean, having the same humor that joins our islands, having some shared history that joins our islands across the Caribbean as well, and having to find brethren who understand you when you're far from home. So that really cemented our friendship as it has with you and me as well, right? And so that's what led me to sort of really reach out and find sort of connect with John Paul and ultimately found the business with him. And then along with John Paul, one of our investors happens to be a gentleman named Kevin Reed, who's actually of Jamaican descent. He's actually related to JP, but he's of Jamaican descent consequently. And so he's been a huge help as well, not just with capital, but he's just an incredibly experienced and incredibly successful entrepreneur in his own right. So every conversation I have with that guy, he takes me through my paces and I learn something. So, it's been really quite an incredible journey to be on thus far, and having built these connections from my Caribbean brethren has been integral in that.
It sounds like things have come full circle. You left the Caribbean, you came up to study, you went all the way up to the UK where you are now. You reunited with people from the Caribbean, both as co-founders and as mentors and investors. And now you're, so to speak, living the life. So that's terrific.
Absolutely.
Congratulations to you on that. And speaking of living the life, maybe you can talk a bit for our audience about the life of being an entrepreneur. And there's a lot of people here who are making early decisions, making later decisions about whether they're going to take another job at a large company, a mid-sized company, a startup company. Can you talk a little bit about how you yourself see the contrast of life as an entrepreneur with startups versus the life that 99% of people have, which is a day job at a large company in some form or fashion. And what is your recommendation for people from the Caribbean to think about in terms of making that decision?
Yeah. It's an incredibly personal decision. So, where to find yourself in that, for some people, working at a big company like a Google or Facebook is perfect. They have a lot of enjoyment and gain a lot of value out of working at a place like a Google or Facebook. And again, that's how they're wired to enjoy that kind of environment. I love small, sort of very focused activities and very entrepreneurial and risky ones. And this is what took me on the startup path ultimately. So it really means you're taking the reins of the horse or the wheel of the bus or the guidelines on the sail yourself. Pick whatever analogy you want, and you're trying to steer the ship here. You're trying to really make a future for yourself and for the business that you've created versus being on what is ultimately a kind of a super tanker where though you're making an important contribution, you may be making an important contribution, it's really a smaller contribution on a sort of a much bigger operation. So I made the personal choice that I really enjoy. I love actually working in startup technology companies. And again, that's my own choice. And by the way, there's also the option of working at a small company. So a startup company is a small company that is geared for hyper growth, which comes with it a lot of risk and a lot of implications for how you sort of raise money and spend money. There's the large company we spoke about, but there's also the small company, which is the third option, which is there are a lot of companies out there that are doing great tech work that are not geared for hyper growth. They build profitable businesses, make their founders very happy, make their employees very happy as well. So I think the sort of bottom line of all of that is that you got to find a model that you really enjoy, because ultimately you're going to be waking up every day, going to that place for 8 hours at minimum if you're lucky, and so you better find something that you enjoy doing and wake up feeling that you're not pushing a boulder up hills every day.
Right, right. So there's at least a half lifetime of a journey behind ending up where you have been. So let's take a step back and talk a bit about the journey that got you to where you are. So maybe you can tell us a bit about your journey from high school through to college and then the progression thereafter. Tell us where you're originally from. Tell us where you went to high school. Tell us what you studied and why you chose to study those things.
Yeah. So I grew up in Port of Spain, which is a kind of a rare thing that I was one of these people who actually grew up in town, as they say. But yeah, my family have always lived there. I'm actually half Jamaican, so the Jamaican side are from Kingston and the Trinidad side are from Port of Spain, and I grew up in Port of Spain. And I guess from a very early age, I really loved math and physics and chemistry, just science, as we used to say, yeah. And my parents encouraged me. They pushed me a little bit, but I'd say it was more encouragement rather than pushing, because it was clear that I was pretty motivated early on, and that's something that's always served me well, sort of having an internal engine that drives me, rather than having to be driven from outside. So that took me to CIC, where I did high school, which was great. I mean, I have some fantastic teachers there that really inspired me, pushed me as well, and obviously learned a ton from. And then ultimately ended up in the US, where I went to university, then worked at a technology startup before coming over to the UK for more university and more startup stuff. So that, as I said, that journey really started with this sort of love of math and science.
Mm-hmm. What did
And
you choose to
ultimately,
study? What did you choose to study and why? Let's
yeah.
talk about
So I studied material science and then ultimately physics.
that.
Why I did that was that I loved the sort of physical sciences. I love physics, I love chemistry, I love some engineering, and material science was this degree that kind of wrapped it all together in sort of one discipline. So it was really a kind of a mix of all of the things that I liked, and I probably wasn't smart enough to go do three different degrees. So this was a great opportunity to do one and get all of the things that I loved. And then physics in later life, because the area I was particularly interested in was in the physics department. So I continued on into the world of solid state physics. And then ultimately, ended up running and starting this sort of machine learning focused company. So it's, I guess, one of the important things that I learned on that journey is that, you're not rigidly fixed to some path from the moment that you are exiting the womb and you're born, yeah? In that you can, if you're, smart, ambitious, hardworking, and you have some luck on your side, luck's super important in all of this, you can choose a different path as you go. So I got super interested in ML, and so here I am. I sort of learned as much as I could. I'm not a practitioner, but I know enough to be dangerous. And here I am working in and helping to lead an ML focused company. And there'll be another entrepreneurial venture at some point in my future when we've taken this one to success. And let's see where that one ends up being. But again, the important thing is really for me is really to keep sort of pushing myself for excellence, be around amazing people, and really have a kind of a broad view on what's possible.
Knowing what you know now, Jason, if you were to look back on 17-year-old or college age Jason Pinto, what would you tell yourself now, knowing what you know? What would you have told yourself back then?
Whew, yeah, how much would I have told myself? Because obviously, I still have so much to learn. Every day I'm hopefully smarter than the day before. And so if you go back to when I was 17, God, what did I know? But I think a few things. One is to the 17-year-old Jason, I would say, keep focused, keep working really hard, expect a lot out of yourself. You're going to fail at some point, and that's fine. But you're not going to, if you don't fail and if you don't sort of reach really high, you're not going to achieve anything. So, really push yourself to be excellent and be around people that are excellent, and be around people that will drive you to greater heights and greater excellence. But at the same time, remember that you're human. So you have to take care of yourself, right? You have to exercise. It's super important. Exercise, eat right, sleep. These are things that really help power that engine, right? Because you just, you're not this sort of you're not a kind of a machine. You do need rest, and you do need a little bit of other activities to keep you focused ultimately. Because I think when I was 17, I had this kind of very, I would say, short-term view that all you had to do, all you needed to do was beat book, as we used to say. But really being, you know, doing athletics, sleeping, etc., helps you actually be better at academics, helps you succeed in what are your other main pursuits, right? And I guess I didn't have that insight at that time. And then I guess if we're to fast forward to the university student, Jason, still some of the same. Again, you got to have balance there. So, remember that exercising actually pays huge dividends, and having a sort of enough sleep pays huge dividends to the sort of academic pursuit that you're on that is really your singular focus. So I'd say that's still pretty key. But the other thing is importance of things like planning. I was always really bad at that. You just dive in and start chewing away at your problems. It's really important every week, to take a step back and think about what you've achieved the past week, what you want to achieve in the current, coming week, and really, stick to it and drive yourself to stick to it. So really to take a step back every now and again in a regular way, in a structured way, and figure out, even in the short term, where you want to be. If it's that week, think where you want to be in the next month, and so forth. Have a little bit of forethought to that. And again, I say all these things, and I still struggle with some of these things, right? Like taking a step back, living a kind of a balanced life, because all balance actually helps you focus. So still on that journey, I'd say, and still learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, speaking of planning, I don't know if you had planned to live in the UK at this stage of your life, but would be curious to understand a bit from you for people who are considering where they ultimately might want to live, where they might want to pursue the field of AI and deep learning and data science. What does the UK have in terms of advantages and disadvantages since you're there? If you could share with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had no clue I was going to be in the UK. This was not at all planned. I certainly knew I wanted to, spend some time outside of Trinidad, because I knew there was a big world out there, and I was just getting a tiny, tiny sort of taste of it when I was growing up in Trinidad, and I really wanted to, explore the world and see what it had to offer and just learn and expand. So I spent 9 years in the US, and now I've been in the UK for too many years to count now, over a decade. And I can say the UK is really, it's been a really interesting place to build a business, to do some more university, and sort of build my professional network and build friendships, get married, et cetera, raise a family. I would say, the UK, in terms of academic sort of pursuit of machine learning, is clearly near the top of the heap, right? I mean, it's really sort of the US, China, and the UK at this point. Now, the UK is much smaller than either China or the US and has
Mhm.
much fewer resources. So we happen to do really well, even though we're, less resourced than either of those other two countries. That, however,
And
means that
sorry, Jason, when you say resources, what specifically are you referring to? People, capital, money?
money ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
money and institutions,
Mm-hmm.
in that we have a kind of an incredible university system in the UK, but it's scaled for the 66 million people here, right? It's not scaled for the 330 million people in the US or the 1.2 billion people in China. So there are few universities, but there's some very, very good ones. There are fewer companies as well that are focused on ML versus the US and China, where, there's just tons and tons of companies focused on this. So I'd say we really, really punch above our weight. We are a force to be reckoned with, but we're clearly smaller in our efforts than the US and China. However, a man does not live by bread alone. You have to consider where you want to spend time, where you want to
Mm-hmm.
live,
Mm-hmm.
where you want to raise a family ultimately, where your friends are, where your contacts are. And so for me, the complete package right now is the UK, in
Right.
that
So,
I built a family here, I have great friends here, I have great professional network here. Who knows? We may move at some point and go somewhere else, but it's
right.
been great in the UK.
Right. As you said about the entrepreneurial life, it's really the choice that a person has to make.
Exactly. Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, we're not machines geared purely for finding the optimal solution, right? Life is a bit messier than that. And like sometimes you end up in a place where it may be suboptimal for your career, but it's optimal for other things. Or so, so you really have to look at life in its holistic sense and think very broadly about that.
Right. So speaking of optimizing and origins that may or may not be optimal, we're all from the Caribbean, and yet we've gone on and done these things in these environments that support entrepreneurship and very rapid acceleration of high technology. What for you would you say your Caribbean roots has played in terms of that advantage? What would you say are the pros and cons of being from the Caribbean and pursuing the pursuits that you have endeavored to try to achieve?
Yeah, I would say for me, probably one of the most important gifts I've received from having grown up in the Caribbean is, the fact that we're small. And consequently, we know we have to work twice as hard than if you were born in a country like, if you happen to be lucky enough to be born in a sort of rich part of China or anywhere in the US where there's tons of resources, there's everything's at your doorstep, excuse me. In the Caribbean, it's not so hard, it's not so easy, right? So you have to struggle a little bit to make things work and make things happen. And most people would see it as a huge disadvantage, but to a certain extent, it's a gift
Mhm.
because that has served me in great stead later in life because it's given me a bit of toughness, right? And a bit of grit and a bit of perseverance that I wouldn't have had if things were sort of super, super easy and super at your doorstep or at your feet, I would say. But I guess the downside is that sometimes it's a bit hard to get taken seriously, right? In that, you open your mouth and people think, oh, it's good times, Jason from Trinidad. When you have to sort of lay down low and say, no, I'm here for serious business now. Like, you really have to sort of make your presence felt and make sure that people take you seriously and so forth, because it's not what people associate with the Caribbean, right? Everybody knows about Carnival, everybody knows about soca, everybody knows about party. People don't tend to think, ooh, powerhouse of physics, powerhouse of data science. These are people we should take seriously. So I'd say that's the kind of, that's the sort of stereotype that comes along with being from the Caribbean that I don't always enjoy, but it's par for the course, and take the beauty along with the stereotypes.
Speaking of taking things seriously, what principles would you say you have found you've taken seriously to enable you to be successful?
Yeah, I'd say number one is integrity. You are, going to deal with people, whether you happen to remain in academics, be it a startup, go to a big company, doesn't matter. Even if you're doing the most esoteric thing in data science or machine learning, you're going to have to deal with people. And for me, dealing with people in a way that is, of high integrity, i.e., very straightforward, honest, and direct, is super important. And I look for people with high integrity in every business I do as well. And that's a kind of a table stakes, so a very important flaw for me. So that's one. So the other one, and I mentioned it already, is grit. You have to be tough. Okay. You're going to get a bloody nose every now and again. You're going to lose the game. You may be first in your class today, but guess what? You haven't been to the class above where there's people 10 times better who are going to, kick your butt. And you're just going to have to learn from that and stretch yourself and be tough. So grit is super important in this journey of life. And again, that comes not just in the sort of academic sphere and the professional sphere, but in your personal life as well, right? Like life has its ups and downs, and you have to be gritty to work through them. But then the third one for me, I'd say, is kind of hunger. And that comes in the form of maybe ambition, which sometimes people frown at. But for me, it's really a hunger to be better, to do better, to expect more out of yourself and others around you. And it comes in every sphere of life, not just in terms of data science and machine learning, but in how you behave as people with each other, right? You should always expect, just really great things out of the way people behave with each other and how they treat each other and so forth. And of course, you can imagine that lands me in a lot of frustration at times, because I'm sometimes disappointed in myself because I didn't, get up at the time I wanted to and get cracking when I did. Or sometimes people disappoint me because I expect more and they don't deliver. But that's super important. That's really, really important to me. So those are the sort of three things that I'd say near the top of the list, or at the top of the list, I should say, for me, is what's driven me to where I am today and what I think are really important.
Sure. Drilling down a bit on that last one, in terms of hunger, where do you find your sources of inspiration, the things that make you hungry and drive yourself forward? What types of things do you do to stimulate yourself in the direction that you feel is a worthwhile direction for life?
Yeah, there's a bit of a smorgasbord of things in there, actually. So I guess I'm an engineer and a scientist at heart. So just cracking a problem in of itself has a kind of a real beauty and an enjoyment to me in that. I get real enjoyment out of that. So the thrill of chase for an answer and an elegant solution to a problem in of itself is something that gives me joy. And then if we step sort of one circle wider, a company, as I described earlier, is kind of like building a machine. And it's a machine geared to solve a problem, right? And in this case, it's a commercial problem, right? It's a problem that a customer has. And so seeing customers use solutions to problems that aren't great, that drives me insane and makes me want to sort of find a great solution to a problem that really gives a customer joy. So I'm always chasing that as well. It really drives me. And then I guess there's maybe a little bit of competitiveness that I always want to be the best and do the best, but that's small. Like I think ultimately you have to be driven by yourself and by your internal motion, I should say, rather than the people running the race around you. Because at some point there are going to be great people around you. They're not. Sometimes they aren't, but you can't let that change your sort of own internal drive.
On that first one, Jason, when you talk about being hungry to break a problem down and really solve it in an elegant way, when do you think you first figured that out about yourself? And what do you think are the sorts of things that allowed you to figure that out?
That one was early. That one was very, very early. I mean, that was, God, probably grade school, doing maths in grade school or something like that, or doing science in grade school. That kind of endorphin rush you feel when you get that. And of course, in grade school, there's an answer for every problem. So it's a little bit of a lollipop rather than a real deep-seated feeling of enjoyment. But you still enjoy that sugar rush of, oh man, I solved that problem. So yeah, that's where I'd say where it started. And then, as I progressed in my own learning and my own reading, more and more abstract problems that don't always have a simple solution, that continued on. I still got that kind of endorphin rush from it. But it really started early. It really, really started early.
Good, good. Now, translating some of that energy for the young folks out there who are either in high school, they're in college, they're in the first decade of their professional lives, what should they be thinking about in terms of their careers? And you've covered this incredible landscape in your own journey as a technologist and an investor. What are the things that are different now that people really need to be thinking about in terms of the future of their careers?
Yeah, I'd say the one big one, of course, is access. So when I was trying to go to university and so forth, I had to go look at a big book, a big catalog to figure out, you know, what were the good universities doing, what courses were where, who taught what where, these kinds of things. Now everything's on the web, and I mean everything. So the access is there. So it's really like night and day versus when I was starting on my own journey. However, that does not mean that you don't have to be motivated to pick up yourself and go find the answer, right? Even though I had to look in a book, you get to go Google it. Some person still has to be motivated enough to get up and go. And so that is something that remains, and something that I'll tell high school students, something that I'll tell people on their own later on in their professional path, that it's really the get up and go you have to have, the ambition, the hunger you have to have. The one thing as well that certainly has changed, the other thing, excuse me, I should say, that certainly has changed is that I think when I was still in sort of high school in Trinidad and grade school, there was a kind of a very narrow bandwidth of potentials that one could imagine for oneself. In that, if you like math and science, you had to be an engineer. And if you like languages, you had to be a lawyer. And if you liked anything else, business, you had to go and be an accountant, right? And those were kind of the three options on offer. And it really, I mean, you know that, right? That was the way it was, right? And it really took my having lucky enough to have the opportunity to see the world outside Trinidad, that I realized like there's basically a sort of infinite palette of options, right? In some ways that can be bewildering, but it's really infinite. So someone starting off in their journey at high school and progressing onwards, really find the things that you enjoy doing and that you're good at. Those two don't always overlap, but you got to know both. And then start understanding and mapping out, talking to people that you may know who have, careers later on. So talk to them and find out what path they took to get to their careers, whether it started with the same interests and sort of path that you were on, and what steps they took to get there. And it helps kind of give you the art of the possible and shape up what's possible and what you would need to do to get there, and so on. And yeah, dream big, and dreaming big sometimes means you're going to fall flat on your face. But again, if you don't dream big, you're not ever going to achieve much. And again, later on in your career, for people that are already out there and professionals and so forth, obviously the game's a little bit different because you're older, you're sort of already made some progress in whatever your chosen career is. If you decide to change paths and maybe do something more focused on data science, there again, access to material in terms of online courses, online books, etc. It's almost too much to begin with. There's just so many resources out there to help you really retool for a kind of a different path if you decide that you want to change paths, for example. So I'd say, dive in and set some goals. That's for me is pretty important to have a kind of very fixed finite goal that's stretched but achievable. Hit that one and then go to the next one, right? So just keep at it and keep driving yourself and have a kind of an end goal in mind about ultimately where you want this kind of path to take you, and be open to change. I'd say that's the final bit, and it's the bit for both the sort of high school student and someone later on in their professional career. You have to take a kind of a Bayesian approach to this, right? And that you're going to learn new things as you go, and that will change your view on where you want to be. And so be open to those changes. Now, not to the point where you're going to change where you want to grow up to be every 5 minutes, like we did when you were 6 years old, but be open to change and be open to new information, because you may end up being heavily influenced by that.
So speaking of thinking big and trying something and jumping in and failing, both you and I as entrepreneurs know that life is not all about the drive and the success, right? There's many periods of downtime when you're just really stuck in a rut and you're trying to figure out that source of inspiration and what comes next. So what can you offer to people in high school who might be stuck for a little bit, people who are in college trying to figure out the direction and they don't necessarily feel that what they're studying right now is going to lead to what their dreams are, people who may have started their first job and kind of now dismayed about whether or not they made the right choice? What are the lessons you have learned about picking yourself up and recovering from the down times?
Yeah, and for sure they are, right? I think it's great that you raised that point, because I think when you get to this stage, people earlier on in their own journey tend to think that there was some straight line that connected where I started to where I am today. And I can tell you not. There's huge ups and downs, peaks and valleys that led to where I am today. So I'd say, first off, and maybe this is talking to younger me as well, stop bashing your head against that wall. So at some point, you have to realize that that wall is not going to crumble no matter how hard you bash your head against it. Pause, take a step back and reassess, and talk to people. It's super important. Talk to people, because you're going to help shape your own views, right? In that, getting your views out in language or on paper, typing them out, writing them out, sharing them with a friend. In so doing, it's going to help you shape your own views on where you are today, where you potentially want to be. And occasionally, you'll get actually some useful feedback from the people you speak to as well, right? If you pick the right people, they may actually point out, hey, you said you want to do thing X. Let me interrogate that point and see if I can help you find a path out of where you are today to that new space X. So I'd say that's really important. You have to take a step back. It all comes back to sort of giving you some space, giving you some headspace to think about the next thing and plan, and talk to people. And ultimately, talk to people ultimately means ask for help. And this is also something I'm not great at and I'm continuing to learn, but asking for help is really important. So find the people around you who are, on a path that you may want to go on, or are just wise people who have, had some scar tissue from their own journeys that may be a good sounding board, and play it out with them.
Terrific. We have a fantastic audience of people in the field of data science and trying to apply machine learning to something big in their lives and their professions. What's your hope for the people who are listening to us? What are your own hopes and dreams for the next generation of people who might want to follow in your footsteps?
Well, that good that you end there, because first of all, I hope they find their own path. So don't follow my footsteps. You got to create your own path that is unique to you. And hopefully a lot of you will soar even higher than I did. I hope all of you will soar even higher than I did. And that is my sincere hope. And maybe you'll listen to this and be a little bit inspired. Maybe I'll challenge some of your thinking. That's really important to me, that we challenge people and hopefully get them out of ruts that they're in and where they're thinking, help them think a bit bigger, a little bit deeper maybe. But ultimately, it's about finding a path that leaves you, first of all, happy, because no matter what you do, you're going to spend 8 hours at a job. And so if you're not happy doing what you're doing in your 8 hours of job time, excuse me, it's going to be a very, very long day. So hopefully you find something that makes you happy and gives you fulfillment. And that's, at its core, what I hope for all the people that are listening, that is this sort of path that they're on that will get them there.
Do you find time to read and listen to podcasts and maybe even look at some videos, Jason?
Frightfully too little, actually. It's depressing how many unread books I have piling up here, but I always joke I'll start reading more when I'm retired. But yeah, I do spend an occasional night reading.
Any good channels or books that you might want other people to know about at this point?
Yeah, I picked 3 because I knew this question was coming. So I'll start with Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. It's a book by Richard Feynman, who was unquestionably one of the greatest physicists of this century, of last century actually. He was, very well known for having essentially created electrodynamics, but importantly was a really interesting person as well, and that he had incredibly broad interests, not just academically, but outside of academics as well. And he was apparently a really fun guy. So this book is a kind of a compendium of his crazy anecdotes and some of the harebrained things he was on, all the while talking about some amazing science that he did and what drove him to do it. So I love the balance of that one, and it's always been really inspiring to me. And then another inspiring one is a bit of a weird one. It's a book called The White Boy Shuffle. It's a piece of fiction written by a guy named Paul Beatty. And the reason that I've always loved that book is that he deals with being an outsider. So he's a little bit of an odd bird. And, being a kind of this sort of nerd that I grew up as, you always feel a little bit of an odd bird yourself. So his exploration of growing up as this odd bird, I've always really felt a real connection to, and he writes really eloquently about that. So it's a great piece of fiction and a book I've always loved. And then finally, I guess, to stay on target with what we're talking about today, ML and AI, so neural networks and deep learning. So it's an online book by a researcher named Michael Nielsen. Really, first of all, it's a great book, and it's free, and it's interactive. So it's really a kind of a great taster. It's not super, it's reasonably deep, but not academic level deep, like for practitioners. But it's a great introduction to the space. And as I said, Nielsen's awesome. He does amazing stuff. And it's a great online tutorial. So I'd recommend those 3.
Do they use Python in there?
I believe they do, yes.
Terrific. Thanks for sharing those. So we're coming up on the end of our time here, but any parting words of wisdom for us? Any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, that's a hard one, actually. I suppose it's something I've mentioned a few times before, right? Dream big and work hard at it. There's really no substitute for sort of gritty hard work, right? Tough it out, bash your head against that problem once, twice, 3 times until you figure it out. There's no substitute for that, sadly. I wish they came up with that magic elixir, but there's no substitute for the hard work, and at the end of it, dreaming big, like thinking really big about where this kind of hard work and effort can take you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for spending the time with us. It's been very inspirational and great to continue to have you as part of the group here, and hopefully people can reach out to you if they have questions directly. So thanks again, Jason.
Awesome. Really great to chat, Jeff. Thanks again for having me.
Okay, all the best.